Hey there! Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, let's talk about the common problems for Dodge Ram 1500 year 2009 to 2017, the Chrysler 300, and the Chrysler Town&Country year 2008 to 2012. If you are the car owners of these cars, please keep on watching. First, let's start from the problem number 1, and that is the TIPM system problems. When you open the hood, you will see the total integrated power module, so-called the TIPM, down in the right corner. The TIPM usually is responsible for controlling the electrical parts and function, such like the blow motor, the fuel pump, the power window, and the wiper blades on and on. You can imagine it plays an important role to control all the electrical devices. However, as you can see, the box itself is not very sealed, and you can even see directly the wires down below the fuse very easy. So over time, the moisture is very easy to get into the TIPM box. Once so, some funny things will happen, such like your wipers go on and off automatically. Our suggestion is to check the fuse box periodically to make sure there's no any corrosion or dust on the fuses. If any leaks, the TIPM box has the corrosion. Depends on the series level, you may need to consider of replacing the TIPM unit. Problem number 2, the third brake light leak. Similar to Ford F-150 car owners, few Dodge Ram car owners ever had the third brake light leaking problem. Typically, the water will seep from the top of the light and get into the back seat button. This leaking problem will lead to the water coming inside your back seat button. You will find there is water stain and the back seat button is wet, which is supposed not to happen, but the reason to cause so is the third brake light has the original design flaw. The dealer normally will replace the third brake light with the brand new one if your car is still under the warranty. Problem number 3, the cruise control on and off button does not work properly. Some Ram 1500 car owners occasionally will encounter the situation that the cruise control button doesn't work as they want. Not saying it completely doesn't work, but every 3 times out of 100, it may quit its job. Although it's not a very serious problem, but it does is annoying, especially to the people who usually commute on the highway. They will need this cruise control function on their road drive. If you search on the forum, you will know it's caused by the wire which connects to the button getting loose. The fixing way is to open the socket, replace the switch, and replace the wire underneath the cruise control button. This is not a very difficult job, but remember to pay attention not to miss the airbag which is sit next to the button. Problem number 4, more values about the cooling system. Before we discuss the most common problem of Ram 1500, I'd like to mention about the cooling system. In the whole Dodge Ram truck cooling system, there are a couple parts which are prone to fail. Example, the water pump is tend to leak for some reasons, and the radiator cap may wear over time just like every other vehicle. Then is the radiator, which the seal may fall off sometimes. Our suggestion here is to have a regular check on these components to make sure the cooling system can work well. Problem number 5, the oil filter housing headache. Next, let's see the most common problem happen to the Jeep 3.6-liter VVT engine, and that is the oil filter housing leaking. The excess oil will come out of the housing and leak down to the engine. Very common reason to cause this problem is we over-torque the bolt and cause the crackdown. The proper torque will be 116 pounds-Newton. Over torque with too much torque will cause the crackdown of the housing. Before we talk about the symptoms of a failed oil filter housing, let me quick recap its function. The major job of the engine oil cooler is to lower the temperature of the engine oil. With the air passing over the cooler, it allows the engine oil to remain proper temperature with the metal square cooler to maintain the oil viscosity and the engine operation. Meanwhile, from the picture, you can see the little circular holes, which are for the oil feed lines. These oil return lines will constantly drain that oil back into the radiator. While the oil is being sent back to the cooler, it is being cooled with the metal square cooler, which is in contact with the flowing air constantly. The average cost for a Ram 1500 engine oil cooler replacement is around $200 to $300, in which the cooler housing costs around $135 to $150, and the labor cost is around $150. If you have opportunity to learn about the whole replacement, you will feel the labor cost we mentioned is really worthy. The whole replacement process will need to disassemble the air hose, the intake area, unplug all the connect tubes and wires, remove the bolt from the intake and the manifold. Alright, except they overtorque the housing, there is another major reason to cause the Ram 1500 engine oil cooler failure, and that is the plastic oil cap of the hole, which will cause the cooling fluid to leak out the cooler in seconds. Once the cooling fluid is drained, the cooler loses the function to cool down the temperature. The overheating light will appear on the dashboard when the cooling system is completely dry. When the situation gets worse, it may also damage the whole engine. To solve this design flaw, Dodge did the modification on these seals in 2014 to make sure no more plastic seals pop out problems. Also, the filter itself tends to leak potentially, so you may see the fluid stain near the metal parts. Some are because there are cracks down the filter, and some are because the filter is over-torqued during installation. Especially the type of Ram 1500 coolers is the kind that tied in with the engine's cooling system. Once the filter is leaking, this device will affect the whole cooling system immediately. Without the filter's filtrate, the dirt and gunk then will contaminate the coolant. Earlier you can find out the leaking filter, easier you can solve the problems. Since now we know the engine cooler failure reasons, next I'd like to give some reminders about the failed oil filter system. In case you sense any of these symptoms, you will know how to handle it. Number 1. The leaking oil puddle on the ground. The most common sign is the leaking oil. Whenever there is the oil puddle under your vehicle, check the car at once. Normally, the leak steam may come from the cracked oil pans, aged gasket, or seals. Then remember to check the engine oil cooler adapter, which connects the oil lines. These components, like the seals, oil lines, and gasket, will eventually wear out. Also, check the cooler seals and the plastic oil cap, which we just mentioned earlier. Number 2. Oil in the cooling system. Normally, an engine oil cooler should last as long as your car and the engine. However, when you feel the engine temperature is rising, the engine power is losing, the engine is misfiring, or the exhaust emission is increasing and is in dark color, better visit the mechanic soon. The reason to cause the oil get into the cooling system is the oil pressure raised by the bed oil cooler. When the oil pressure is higher than cooling system pressure, it then forces the oil to get into the cooling system. Number 3, the coolant is leaking out. Here, we want to take the Chrysler Town&Country minivan as example, as this car used the same engine oil cooler as the Ram 1500 truck. One of our repair shop friends shared this photo with us. From the picture, you can see clearly the coolant and oil is leaking out all over the cooler. In order to fix this problem, the mechanic needs to DIY an oil vacuum machine to dry the oil, clean all the mess, change the manifold gasket, and then install the new oil cooler. Overall speaking, the oil cooler seldom fails except for any kind of leaking. The oil cooler oil lines, seals, plastic tape, or the oil cooler core eventually may wear out and cause the leaking. Or just as we mentioned, the leaking coolant also will damage the cooler. So, whenever you note any of these symptoms, or when you see the check engine light or the temperature warning light is on, that is the signal to remind you to visit a mechanic right away. Alright my friend, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you for your watching and I will see you very soon next time. Adios!